The future of humanity lies in the skies, beyond the clouds and in the great unknown of the cosmos in which our little blue planet dwells. We have spent the past several decades studying that which we do not know and have made extraordinary achievements for the human race, such as our ability to travel to our moon, and have achieved a myriad of discoveries and successes since then. Now scientists' sights are set on further outliers of our solar system and galaxy, in the hopes we can become more acquainted with our cosmic home. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 scientific discoveries using telescopic technology. Scientists sent a huge underwater space telescope into Lake Baikal. In southern Siberia lies a freezing lake by the name of Lake Baikal. Russian, Czech, Polish, Slovakian, and German scientists collaborated developing and sending a colossal specialized telescope into its icy chasms in hopes of searching for rare and unusual particles, including the universe's most tiny elusive particle, neutrinos. The telescope in question is the Baikal GVD and was created with searching for neutrinos in mind. Neutrinos themselves are tiny particles that are subatomic and almost have no mass at all. They are not electrically charged. Neutrinos can technically be found anywhere, not necessarily exclusively at the bottom of mystic Siberian lakes. However, their immensely small size makes it extremely difficult to detect them under normal circumstances. Lake Baikal is 1,700 meters deep and is presently known to be the Earth's deepest body of landlocked water. Lake Baikal is full of fresh water, covered by a sheet of ice which will help keep out any solar or cosmic interference with the neutrino detectors, which are commonly built underneath the ground in order to avoid said interference. As such, Lake Baikal can be a location of scientific note when it comes to researching and finding these tiny particles. The neutrino detectors were drilled through the ice 4 kilometers away from the shore of Lake Baikal, and the scientists proceeded to place the components of Baikal GVD 1,310 meters into the freezing icy lake. Glass spheres were attached to the telescope. These glass spheres are photomultiplier tubes that can see the specific spectrum of light produced when a neutrino is in the lake water. This device is dubbed the Cherenkov light after Pavel Cherenkov, a Soviet physicist. Baikal GVD is a truly huge telescope, the second largest neutrino detector ever created. The first is the IceCube South Pole Neutrino Observatory searching for neutrinos in Antarctica. The IceCube detects roughly 275 neutrinos a day in the atmosphere. Someday the scientists involved hope to expand the size of Baikal GVD. Among the scientists was Dmitry Naumov and Ber Shaboynov, both of the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. Shaboynov stated about the lake, of course, Lake Baikal is the only lake where you can deploy a neutrino telescope because of its depth. Fresh water is also important, water clarity too. And the fact that there is ice cover for 2 to 2.5 months is also very important. There is a radio telescope on the far side of the moon. As we expand into space, thoughts of moon colonization often flow into people's minds, and indeed, various organizations have made attempts at establishing a human presence on the moon. In December 2018, the Chinese Lunar Exploration Program sent a mission lander U-2-2, otherwise known as Jade Rabbit 2, onto the moon, making the rover the very first to land successfully on the dark side of the same mission. The fourth part of the Chinese Lunar Exploration Program's Change E4 mission was the first robotic spacecraft to plant and sow seeds on the moon. The NCLE, known as Netherlands-China Low-Frequency Explorer, orbited the moon and was designated to catch radio frequencies between 80 kHz and 80 MHz. As the name suggests, the project is a collaboration between the Netherlands and China. Specifically, China's National Space Agency and the Netherlands Institute for Radio Astronomy. The Westerbork Synthesis Radio Telescope and the EVN, European Very Long Baseline Interferometry Network. The NCLE allows China and the Netherlands to observe radio astronomy occurring by the dark side of the moon, which is believed to be ideal as it is far removed from human interference. The radio telescope is going to capture emissions from the 21 centimeters emissions range, places in space that we believe are linked to past periods in the universe's history, such as the elusive cosmic dawn, a cosmic era previously unknown to us. Using the telescope, there is a chance we could examine the light that could help us understand a plethora of things about the universe, such as the logistics behind dark matter and when the first stars were created or how the galaxies formed. The director of Radboud Radiolab, Dr. Mark Kleinwalt, officially stated, "Our contribution to the Chinese Chang'e mission has now increased tremendously. We have the opportunity to perform our observations during the 14-day-long night behind the moon, which is much longer than was originally the idea." 3 years of hard work are finally paying off for both Dutch and Chinese scientists as they unfurl the telescope's antennas and begin this new era of cosmic science for us. Captured during its run. Heino Vogt of the Radboud University, professor of astrophysics and radio astronomy, said, "We are finally in business and have a radio astronomy instrument of Dutch origin in space. The team has worked incredibly hard and the first data will reveal how well the instrument truly performs." Evidently, the NCLE is a national pride of both the Netherlands and China. The antennas were supposed to be released far sooner than they were, but due to a large amount of data suggesting they would deteriorate and break, researchers made the executive decision to gather more information before proceeding. Currently, the antennas are picking up cosmic intel from an estimated 13 billion years before our time, when the universe was still in its infancy. They are still unfurling at a slow, steady rate, and once they completely unfold, we are sure to discover signals that were emitted from the Big Bang itself. As such, we'll know an immeasurable amount of information about us, where we come from, and about the center of existence. South Africa's Meerkat radio telescope just discovered 1,300 galaxies. The South African Meerkat radio telescope is a true work of wonder. Utilizing a mere quarter of its possible power, it managed to discover a shocking 1,300 brand new galaxies in a spot where a mere handful of 70 were officially verified prior to this discovery. The Meerkat has 16 satellite dishes, which, using its 64 receptors, is expected to someday soon become the most powerful radio telescope on Earth. The Meerkat's chief scientist, Dr. Fernando Camillo, stated they are far better than we could have expected. This means that this telescope, as is today only 1/4 of the way to its full contingent, is already the best radio telescope in the Southern Hemisphere. This means great things for the future of galactic discoveries, especially since throughout this decade the SCAR have made plans of placing 3,000 dishes across an entire square kilometer in various countries to give researchers even more amazing images of outer space. The potential for discovery brought about by this is immense. Some scientists estimate that the potential of what we could find will be raised by upwards of 10,000 times that of which we know now. Black holes, dark matter, energy, supernovas, galaxies, we might be able to for the first time gain a full vision of what our universe is composed of and what it is like up close, and maybe even uncover more about its origins tens of billions of years ago. The Meerkat's isolated location in South Africa's Karoo region allows for the best conditions to search the stars without much light pollution. Another radio telescope connected to the Meerkat is planned on being built in Australia sometime within the coming days. Nenadi Pandor, the South African Minister of Science and Technology, stated, "This is the first time that an African group of countries will host global science infrastructure of this character. It's a first for us as Africa, and also it's a first for the world because the world hasn't done this in Africa. We are building a global infrastructure for the world." Furthermore, Pandor announced his belief that theirs would be the greatest telescope in the world. More than 20 countries are participating in the creation of the dishes. SCAR managed to raise and invest $205 million into their telescope research and development, most of which has been primarily funded by the curious public and fellow scientists who wish to see the project flourish and thrive. And what do you make of these recent discoveries? For years, countless theories have been put forward for why past civilizations collapsed. A common theme that's seen around the world is that over 10,000 years ago, civilizations seem to have hit their peak. Göbekli Tepe, which is estimated to be around 12,000 years old, the ancient Egyptians, known for being masterful craftsmen, and Teotihuacan, which researchers have now said was abandoned due to an ice age. One idea for why this civilization seemingly fell and were abandoned by people nearby was due to a large cataclysmic event. This event was given the name of the Younger Dryas, although it's important to note that many researchers didn't accept this idea, noting that we don't have enough evidence to prove that this happened. However, a new scientific paper that was published on the 5th of January 2022 revealed that this event did happen. The paper was submitted to the Scientific Progress Journal, and the abstract reads as follows. The progress of science has sometimes been unjustifiably delayed by the premature rejection of a hypothesis, for which substantial evidence existed, and which later achieved consensus. Continental drift, meteorite impact cratering, and anthropogenic global warming are examples from the first half of the 20th century. This article presents evidence that the Younger Dras impact hypothesis is a 21st century case. The hypothesis proposes that the airburst or impact of a comet 12,850 years ago caused the ensuing 1,200-year-long Younger Dras call period and contributed to the extinction of the Pleistocene megafauna in the Western Hemisphere and the disappearance of the Clovis Pello Indian culture. Soon after publication, a few scientists reported that they weren't able to replicate the critical evidence, and the scientific community at large came to reject the hypothesis. By today, however, many independent studies have reproduced that evidence at dozens of Younger Dras science. This article examines why scientists so readily accepted the early false claims of irreproducibility, and what lessons the premature rejection of the Younger Dras impact hypothesis holds for science. End quote. This is big news, as many researchers have theorized that during the Younger Dras, it wasn't just dozens of animals that went extinct, but also various different cultures, with them saying that the event created a sort of global reset. This means that potentially dozens of advanced civilizations perished within a short amount of time. And our books are missing out on a huge chunk of history. Many praised the paper but were critical of modern scientists, saying that this type of behavior is seen far too often, where scientists will fail to look into something even though there's more than enough evidence. One scientist called Mr. Baker commented on this via social media. He said the following, "I'm a retired professor and I took part in some of these studies that looked into this event. And to me, the reason I came up with for why this didn't move forward as quickly as it should have came down to status and reputation. It seemed that many people didn't want to make that initial leap and put their name to something without being 100% sure. I can understand why they did this, but then the question remains that if every scientist does this, it means that we're never going to move forward. And in turn, science suffers as a whole because people are worried about attaching themselves to something in fear of being wrong." End quote. This study doesn't just end with acceptance, though. Back in 2010, other studies were submitted, and at the time they were cast aside by scientists, but they went into detail about how the Younger Dras event actually caused large floods around our planet. And now that this study has substantial evidence to back up that this happened, it's likely that people will now be looking into other theories that directly happened due to the Younger Dras event. One study said the following, "The erosion surface and gravel suggests that at least 2 glacial outburst floods swept into the Arctic Ocean." End quote. Recent discoveries by underwater archaeologists suggest that this event ended up sinking many cities. One such finding was made of the coast of Turkey, where researchers found traces of ancient civilizations dating back since the time of Noah. One thing that's interesting is that many civilizations talk about a great flood, and some of these are even documented. Some scientists don't actually doubt that this happened, but have suggested that it may not have been as massive as it's made out. For example, one theory is that the Great Flood could have been the flooding of the Black Sea. Researchers have said that rising water levels happened in this region around 7,000 years ago. Again, scientists know that there was an event that sank cities. After all, several underwater ancient cities had been discovered in recent years. It's the magnitude of the event that people can't seem to agree on. Woods Hole Oceanic Institution said the following about this alleged flood. Now, a new study in the January 2009 issue of Science Review suggests that if the flood actually occurred, it was much smaller, hardly of biblical proportions. Lev Ujosin of Woodhull Oceanographic Institution and Florian Philip Stefan Contanescu found evidence that Black Sea and seawater levels rose only 5 to 10 meters, and this was around 9,400 years ago, not 50 to 60 meters as previously proposed. The flood would have drowned only around 2,000 square kilometers of land rather than 70,000 square kilometers. End quote. Robert Ballard, one of the world's best-known underwater archaeologists, detailed his findings that were made in Turkey. His dive teams had been investigating areas around Turkey that date back to the time of Noah. Ballard has a great track record for making discoveries that others couldn't. In fact, going back to 1985, he and his team sent down some robotic rovers that were equipped with some of the best cameras around, and they were able to locate one of the most famous ships of all time, the Titanic. Since then, he's used his advanced underwater robots to answer some of the world's biggest questions, one of which is, did the Great Flood ever happen? He said the following, "Where I live in Connecticut, there is ice a mile above my house all the way back to the North Pole, around 15 million kilometers. That's a big ice cube, but then it started to melt. We're talking about the floods of our living history. The question is, was there a mother of all floods? We went in there to look for the flood, not just a slow-moving, advancing rise of sea level, but a really big flood that then stayed. The land that went under stayed under." End quote. Ballard said that he thinks that his team were able to pinpoint a timeline for when this event happened, saying that it likely occurred around 5000 BC, and even some experts backed up these estimates, saying that this is likely when Noah's flood would have occurred. So what do you make of this new paper detailing that the Younger Dras did happen? Although it may seem that space is clearly a much larger mystery than our own planet, the fact remains that there are elements of both realms in which our understanding is deeply lacking. Mysteries remain all over our planet, stretching far into the space beyond, and the hunt for answers is unceasing. So today, we will be diving into 3 such mysteries on Earth and beyond, detailing how their discoveries affect our knowledge of the world around us. Scientists drill through thousands of feet of ice to Antarctica's Lost Lake. Although many people picture Antarctica as a single massive sheet of ice stretching as far as the eye can see, this is not the case at all. In fact, a team of researchers recently underwent a drilling operation to access one of Antarctica's so-called lost lakes, known as Lake Mercer. This lake is considered a lost lake because it is entirely covered by a sheet of ice, which makes it inaccessible. At least until now. The team responsible for accessing Lake Mercer and conquering the issue of the incredibly thick ice sheet that has prevented access up until now drilled a massive hole approximately 4,000 feet or just over a kilometer deep through the sheet until they reached the body of water. This hole hardly spans more than the width of a couple of hands across, but is still wide enough to allow access to the body of water below, which researchers are excited for new and exciting discoveries. The drilling project was completed as a part of the Subglacial Antarctic Lake Scientific Access Project and took 3 days to drill all the way through the ice sheet. So why are scientists so interested in accessing this lost lake below the ice? For starters, they hope to gather information that will inform our knowledge of the geologic activity that occurs in and around Antarctica, as well as the specific hydrology of such a unique subglacial lake. Although Lake Mercer and other lost lakes may be completely out of sight, that does not mean they are lifeless. Researchers are keen to understand more about how this hidden water moves and circulates underneath such an impressively thick ice layer, as it facilitates the flow of carbon and other organic materials that are necessary for the biological processes that occur even in the freezing depths of Antarctica. And because these previously inaccessible depths have never been explored before, there is the ever-present possibility of uncovering new species of animals and microorganisms as they analyze these new waters. This is not the first time that a hidden lake has been accessed by drilling through the surface ice sheet of Antarctica. Lake Williams was reached in 2013 after drilling through 800 meters of ice, and researchers drilled 4 kilometers down to reach the first level of Lake Vostok before retreating. A failed attempt to reach Lake Ellsworth was made the year before, but the boreholes were unable to penetrate the thick sheet of ice. The seemingly barren and desolate Arctic landscape actually hosts hundreds of large bodies of water, such as these lakes circulating beneath the ice sheet in a complex hidden landscape connected by smaller rivers and streams. Researchers are intent upon analyzing these waterways because of the important role that Antarctica plays in the regulation of our global climate. and the instability that is happening throughout the ecosystem in the wake of warming temperatures and rising sea levels. Scientists have recognized the importance of understanding the intricacies of this mostly uninhabitable land in order to help mitigate the disturbances that its breakdown could enact on our planet. Astronomer finds one of the oldest stars. One of the most fascinating aspects of space is the fact that most of the pinpricks of light that we know of as stars are hundreds of millions of years old, as the star in question is light years away and may not even be in existence any longer. However, despite constantly gazing upon the light from incredibly ancient stars night after night, astronomers believe that they have located one of the oldest stars found to date. And not only that, but it appears that it dates all the way back to the second generation of stars that were formed after the original creation of the universe. The paper announcing this thrilling new discovery stated that these proof-of-concept observations are part of an ongoing effort to spectroscopically confirm low metallicity candidates identified from narrowband photometry. Essentially, this means that this new star was discovered using a new process that measures light intensity in order to identify stars that have previously fallen under the proverbial radar when observed with other methods. Additionally, its ancient origin was able to be further verified by analyzing the unique chemical abundances of the star, which appeared to be made up of only those components which would have been produced as a single first-generation star was born and faded away. While it is incredibly amazing that researchers were able to locate such an old star, this chemical information and the techniques learned from the process of uncovering the star may lead us to the eventual discovery of one of these first-generation stars, none of which have ever been located. No matter which way you look at it, the discovery of this ancient star is nothing short of a scientific breakthrough. When it comes to our knowledge of how the universe was formed and the circumstances under which the stars likely blinked into existence, much of our knowledge is conjecture based on what we have been able to observe about space so far. However, we have not been able to peer far enough into the past to sneak a peek at what things really looked like and how their differences could have led to the formation of early stars until now. For example, in the early days of the universe, before the first stars appeared, the building blocks of the world were restricted to mainly hydrogen and helium, with other elements being created through the thermonuclear fusion within the cores of the new stars. We can follow this breadcrumb trail of elements through the cosmos, and hopefully it will eventually lead to the discovery of one of the very first stars to ever exist. Discoveries such as this one can help us develop a more complete set of information surrounding the circumstances of what the universe looked like as it was coming into existence, which will then inform our understanding of how these circumstances interacted to create the infinite and expansive space that we are orbiting in. A 1,200-year-old Viking sword discovered on Norwegian mountain. From the late 8th century until the early 11th century, the Vikings ruled the seas with fear and acts of violence. During this period of the Middle Ages, these sea-traveling warriors exercised their widespread command by trading, colonizing, and raiding countless civilizations across the European continent and venturing as far as Asia and even North America, when they crossed the Atlantic 5 centuries before Columbus. During their 250-year command of the sea, these Norsemen established themselves as a historically significant civilization, leaving behind many artifacts unique to them as a people, such as fragments of a rudimentary sled and snowshoes made for pack horses. These relics give us insight into the daily lives of a society long lost but not forgotten. In 2017, a small group of men hunting reindeer in the mountains of a planned county, central Norway, made one of history's most remarkable archaeological discoveries in regards to this fascinating people. Wedged between two rocks, the hunters found a rusted, though well-preserved Viking sword likely to have originated between 85 and 950 AD. It is one of many new discoveries found in connection with the new improvements being done to Norway's E39 highway. And, according to a Norwegian glacial archaeology organization, secrets of the ice a result of global warming melting a once completely frozen terrain. Though estimated to be thousands of years old, the sword's remarkable condition can most likely be attributed to the low pressure and extreme cold of the mountaintop, both of which likely prevented further rusting or degradation. Its handle, which was likely organic, made of bone, wood, or leather as tradition held, did not survive the centuries as well as the blade itself, which is, by all accounts, heavier than expected and extraordinarily robust. Science cannot, however, determine how the sword ended up on the lonely mountaintop. The surrounding area was scoured for related artifacts, but archaeologists came up there. It likely belonged to Viking swordsmen, but how or why he ended up alone, so far from, is up for speculation. It is theorized that he was separated from a group during a snowstorm in which he perished, only to be dragged away by local wildlife, leaving behind only his sword to tell his story. What do you make of these new discoveries? It seems like everyday scientists discover something new and fascinating about the world around us. Unfortunately, it can be difficult to keep up to date with all the latest and interesting information that is broadcast 24/7. So today, we're bringing you up to speed with 3 interesting discoveries that you might have missed. Mars is home to the largest waterfall in the solar system. Mars may be the second smallest planet, but it is home to some of the most massive geological features ever discovered, including what once was the largest waterfall in our solar system. The impressive structure is located in Mars' Eccles Chasma. Chasma refers to a large but narrow area of land on another planet that dips below the surface around it, creating steep sides. The Eccles Chasma is about 6 miles wide and 62 miles long. It is found in the Luni Planum Plateau, which is north of Valles Marineris, or the Grand Canyon of Mars. The valleys of the Eccles Chasma contain clay and resemble drainage networks observed on Earth, so the chasma is thought to have been a significant source of water for Mars. It also may have contributed to the formation of a large valley named Cas Valles. Thanks to useful images taken by the high-resolution stereo camera of the Mars Express spacecraft and other cameras on NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, scientists have located a 4,000-mile high cliff in the chasma's eastern region. They believe that this cliff once made up the largest waterfall in the solar system as water poured off the cliff all the way down to the valley floor. This is connected to a change in the climate of Mars that occurred 3.7 billion years ago. At that time, temperatures started to drop, which caused much of the water on Mars to become frozen on the surface or underground. As this occurred, volcanic activity on Mars started to increase. Volcanic activity ultimately melted the ice, leading to the dramatic flooding that would have made the giant waterfall possible. This created a smoothed-out valley floor that would eventually be flooded by basaltic lava. What used to be the giant waterfall of the Eccles Chasma is just a dry cliff. A 4,000-mile-tall waterfall was previously inconceivable. The largest waterfall on Earth is an undersea waterfall called the Denmark Strait Cataract, located in the Atlantic Ocean. The waterfall stands at just over 2 miles tall. While the waterfall of the Eccles Chasma is not active today, the discovery is still important for understanding the history of Mars. Astronomers discover massive galaxy shipyard. Scientists may soon have the opportunity to study how galaxies form clusters after their creation. In a 2021 publication, a team of researchers confirmed the discovery of a protocluster, which refers to a group of galaxies about to group together by the European Space Agency's Planck telescope. The team was able to discover the protocluster by looking through a sample of over 2,000 formations that were potentially in the process of forming a galaxy group. Galaxy clusters are extremely important. Our own solar system, the Milky Way, is part of a cluster called the local group. However, studying protoclusters is difficult because they cannot be detected by optical light. To find them, scientists must look to other regions of the electromagnetic spectrum. Protoclusters tend to appear far more prominently in submillimeter wavelengths. The newfound galaxy group, which has been identified as the G237 protocluster, was observed in the far infrared region. G237 is 11 billion light-years away from Earth. So far, 63 galaxies have been observed as part of the protocluster. As explained by Brenda Fry, co-author of the study, you can think of galaxy protoclusters such as G237 as a galaxy shipyard in which massive galaxies are being assembled. Only this structure existed at a time when the universe was 3 billion years old. Galaxies are created when gravity pulls together stars and other matter. After they are assembled, galaxies show a strong tendency to form clusters. Researchers were initially puzzled by the formation processes of the G237 protocluster. It seemed to be forming stars at an unrealistic rate, more than 10,000 times that of the Milky Way. This should indicate a protocluster that is depleting stellar fuel rapidly. To sustain its level of production, G237 needed a constant stream of fuel in the form of hydrogen gas, which is necessary to form stars. The problem was that scientists did not know where it could be getting this gas. Ultimately, it was concluded that sufficient hydrogen could be drawn from gas threads called filaments that link galaxies in the cosmic web, which is also where protoclusters are located. Fry stated, "We believe that the filaments mediate the transfer of hydrogen gas from the diffused medium of intergalactic space onto these hungry, newly forming protoclusters in the nodes." Researchers also realized some of their data had come from galaxies irrelevant to the protocluster, but the G237 star formation rate remains impressive nonetheless. It appears that the protocluster produces 1,000 solar masses annually, while the Milky Way creates only one. Hopefully, G237 and other protoclusters will help scientists understand the mechanisms of star formation in galaxies and how protoclusters ultimately become superclusters. Australian telescope finds 1 million new galaxies. A powerful Australian telescope has created a highly advanced atlas of the universe. In 2020, the telescope called the Australian Square Kilometre Array Pathfinder mapped 3 million galaxies in the span of 300 hours. This is extremely impressive, especially when compared to the preceding all-sky surveys that took years. It is estimated that 1 million of the galaxies charted by ASCAP have never been observed previously. It all took place in the remote outback of Western Australia, where ASCAP transformed radio signals to images mapping the sky with a level of detail 2 times that of previous surveys. ASCAP only needed 903 images to complete the map, while other telescopes needed tens of thousands. From the Australian desert nearly 500 miles north of Perth, the atlas ended up covering 83% of the sky. This was made possible by ASCAP's 36 antennas, combined with a fiber optic cable that works to create a single ultra-powerful telescope. ASCAP connects the signals from many smaller dishes, which creates more detailed images while remaining less costly than a single larger dish. The 3-story high instrument is run by Australia's National Science Agency, the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation. The telescope's data, which generates at a pace faster than Australia's internet, is received by a supercomputer processing facility in Perth. Researchers hope that ASCAP will help them learn more about how galaxies form and interact. Looking at galaxies billions of light-years away helps scientists to look back in time and understand the universe in its earliest stages. The atlas from the ASCAP is a precursor to even more exciting information to come. Scientists believe that there may be up to 1 trillion galaxies for instruments like the ASCAP to observe. Plus, public data from the telescope will help scientists collaborate and truly make sense of the observations. In fact, an international project will follow soon. The world's largest radio telescope, called the Square Kilometre Array, which will find its home in South Africa and Australia, is currently in the works. It seems we still have more questions than answers about our universe. But scientists are helping us understand more and more at an impressive pace. The stream of fascinating information does not show signs of stopping anytime soon. But what do you make of these interesting discoveries? Science is one of the driving elements of our society, and it is what has allowed us to come so far in such a relatively short amount of time. However, although we have been able to uncover many of the most enduring secrets of the universe, an almost limitless number certainly remains, despite the amazing discoveries that are made every day. So today, we will be looking at 3 exciting new discoveries and what they might mean for how we view and understand the amazing world around us. Frozen tardigrade becomes first quantum entangled animal. Tardigrades are an incredibly unique and hardy species of near-microscopic animals that scientists have been studying for years due to their ability to withstand almost any condition they are placed within. These animals are referred to colloquially as water bears or moss piglets and have a distinctive plump bug-like body with 8 legs that end in small claw-like digits. Notably, their bodies are composed of only 1,000 cells, which allows them the ability to enter a dehydrated state, known as a ton state, in order to weather otherwise unsurvivable conditions. Because of their ability to survive in even the most extreme circumstances, they have been boiled, subjected to ultraviolet radiation, and even accidentally placed on the moon by scientists seeking to understand how their ton state helps them to survive. But some researchers have taken these tardigrades to capacities never before reached by their species. That is, the coldest temperatures and highest pressures achievable in order to ascertain the potential survivability of the species if a frozen tardigrade were incorporated into two quantum-entangled electric circuits before being revived to its standard unturned state. But what is quantum entanglement? It is a very complex occurrence that is typically only applied to the absolute smallest subatomic particles and describes the phenomenon of one particle becoming intimately bound to another particle in such a way that manipulation of one similarly affects the other, even if the particles are separated by incredibly long distances. This relationship has only been demonstrated between single particles in very specific conditions, but the tardigrade researchers wanted to determine whether or not the multicellular organism could be exposed to these conditions and undergo quantum entanglement. The creatures were frozen to trigger a ton state, which shrunk the tardigrades to a third of their original size. They were then frozen to a temperature hardly warmer than absolute zero and placed within the plates of a quantum bit, which initiated entanglement with a second quantum bit unit. They then conducted a series of tests on the system and found that the frequencies of both quantum bits and the frozen ton-state tardigrade changed in tandem with each other, indicating that the three-part system was indeed entangled. They then attempted to revive the tardigrades, with only one out of the initial three surviving and potentially becoming the first quantum-entangled organism. The research surrounding this experiment is still in the very early stages. But the team working on ensuring that the tardigrade becomes the first quantum-entangled animal believes that the results are highly promising. However, it is important to remember that the research backing this claim has not yet been peer-reviewed and has already received some criticism from the scientific community, as several experts believe that the results will not stand up to further experimentation, finding the conclusions faulty. So, from a scientific perspective, it remains to be seen whether or not the tardigrade can add quantum entanglement to its long list of accomplishments, but it is entirely possible that day is not far away. Mysterious radio bursts, tacked to the arms of distant spiral galaxies. Fast radio bursts are one of the many elements of the infinite and mysterious expanse of space that scientists have spent decades trying to understand. These bursts are rapid and brief radio pulses that are emitted by a mysterious source and release enormous amounts of energy in a few milliseconds. In fact, some astronomers estimate that most fast radio bursts produce as much energy in a single millisecond as the sun produces in 3 days. However, one of the reasons that they have remained so mysterious is because they are incredibly hard to track down. Although they emit an enormous amount of energy initially, the bright flares that they produce rapidly fade away and are barely visible by the time that they reach Earth. But, luckily for researchers, the Hubble Space Telescope may have just provided to begin to solve the mystery of what exactly fast radio bursts are. Recently, the telescope was able to locate the origins of 5 fast radio bursts, which were revealed to have been generated within the spiral arms of 5 distant galaxies. This allowed researchers to discard older theories that have proposed fast radio bursts might originate from star explosions or collisions between old neutron stars, which typically occur much further from galaxy arms. They were also able to throw out a third theory suggesting that fast radio bursts originated from dwarf galaxies, as the galactic infrastructure captured by the Hubble Space Telescope was not consistent with this theory. Rather, this location supports a much newer theory that suggests fast radio bursts could be produced by magnetars, an interesting type of neutron star. Magnetars produce an intense magnetic field, which is what could be generating these fast radio bursts that have puzzled scientists for so long. The new Hubble telescope images allowed astronomers to analyze characteristics of the galaxies that were producing the fast radio bursts in order to better understand the properties of the stars that were associated with this strange phenomenon. They combined ultraviolet and near-infrared light in order to gain an understanding of the mass of the galaxies as well as the respective ages of the stars involved. Provides more support for the magnetar theory, Much more research is still needed to definitively say once and for all how fast radio bursts are generated. However, these new images give us much more contextual information about what is happening at the source of these bursts, as well as the composition of the galaxies that are generating them. Alexander Mannings, lead author of the study detailing these exciting new findings, said in a statement that to get a better idea of the overall host galaxy properties, such as its mass and star formation rate, as well as probe what's happening right at the FRB. And as the technology used to obtain these Hubble Space Telescope images has given rise to many new discoveries about the cosmos around us, astronomers hope that it will only be a matter of time before they can definitively determine what causes vast radio bursts once and for all. The oldest known spiral galaxy was just detected. The oldest known spiral galaxy in the universe was just identified, and it was no thanks to some newfangled technology or fancy new telescope either. Rather, it was rediscovered in an old photo that had been taken by the Atacama Large Millimeter Submillimeter Array, or ALMA. The galaxy, which researchers named BRI 1335 to 0417, was formed approximately 12.4 billion years ago and is rendered in surprising detail in the photograph, which appears blurry and unremarkable at first glance. However, upon closer inspection, scientists were able to tell quite a lot about the unassuming little galaxy. For starters, it is 15,000 light-years in diameter, which is approximately one-third the size of our own Milky Way. Although this newly discovered galaxy is not technically the oldest galaxy on record, it does stand out as the oldest known spiral galaxy, having formed an estimated 1.4 billion years after the Big Bang that sparked the creation of our universe. Comparatively, the oldest known galaxy is GNZ 11, which formed about 400 million years after the Big Bang. Although it might seem like a bad thing that the ALMA image of this galaxy is blurry, it actually appears this way because the image was created by capturing radio emissions carbon ions versus the visible light photographs that we are used to. And although this method allows us to see the galaxy in the first place, as visible light would likely not be able to travel far enough to be captured accurately in an image, it does mean that there is even more to the galaxy that we simply cannot see. This is an exciting possibility, especially considering that, even only looking at what is visible in the image, BRI 1350-417 was clearly a huge galaxy for the time period in which it was formed. It is also exceptionally dense, likely containing just as much mass as the Milky Way, even though it is only one-third of the size. Astronomers hypothesize that this density could have come as a result of a collision between two galaxies, which eventually formed this small, dense spiral galaxy fairly early on in the history of the universe. Essentially, this galaxy is incredibly exciting for researchers attempting to uncover the complex processes that led from the initial Big Bang to the creation of the universe as we now know it. It seems that this newly discovered spiral galaxy could be a major stepping stone in our knowledge for how galaxies formed in the wake of the Big Bang, as well as the process of galaxy transformation in general over time, which has largely remained a mystery to researchers. Additionally, the galaxies that can be seen in the universe, spiral galaxies, make up over 70%. So having such an early example of a spiral galaxy is extremely exciting to researchers who cannot wait to see what this discovery has in store for our continued knowledge. But what do you make of these new discoveries? Scientists have always looked up to the sky with hope. With each new discovery that's made, it helps us to understand our place in the universe and whether we're part of something much bigger. With the billions of galaxies and over 700 quintillion planets that reside within the universe, the chances of there being life outside of Earth seem very high. If we're alone and we're special, then why create billions of other galaxies and planets? Planets that we're looking to explore are mainly Mars and Venus, along with moons such as Enceladus and Europa, which orbit Jupiter and Saturn. Going back, NASA's then chief scientist Ellen Stofan claimed that by 2025, scientists will most likely discover prominent signs of life somewhere in the universe, saying that all of the data that NASA has gathered points towards us making a big discovery sometime in the near future. This announcement was made while she was speaking at a panel discussion, which heavily focused on NASA's search for habitable worlds. She said the following: "I think we're going to have strong indications of life beyond Earth within a decade, but I think we're going to have definitive evidence within 20 to 30 years. We know where to look. We know how to look. In most cases, we have the technology and we're on a path to implementing it. And so I think we're definitely on the road. John Grunsfield, who is a physicist and astronaut, carried on with the following. I think we're one generation away in our solar system, whether on an icy moon or on Mars, and one generation away on a planet around a nearby star. NASA has multiple missions going on at the moment whose job it is to search for signs of life. As mentioned, one of the places where scientists think there could be life is that of Jupiter and Saturn's moons, pointing out that Saturn's moon Enceladus could support life due to the ocean being around 1 billion years old, which researchers said places it in a sweet spot. NASA's Kepler Space Telescope was retired in 2018, but during its mission it revealed to scientists that pretty much every star in the sky hosts planets, many of which could have similar conditions to Earth. However, just because other planets aren't as similar to Earth though, it doesn't mean they can't host life. Researchers have been open about this discussion and have said that when it comes to the universe it could be filled with weird and wonderful life forms, many of which may not look like anything we have here on Earth. Paul Hertz, who is the director of NASA's Astrophysics Division, described the Milky Way galaxy as being a soggy place. He said the following: we can see water in the debris that are going to become planetary systems around other stars, and we can even see comets being dissipated in other solar systems as their star evaporates them. Scientists have now said that we should be focusing on high C and exoplanets. High C and worlds are planets with thick and heavy atmospheres that are abundant with hydrogen, which allow for oceans to exist and flourish even under immense temperatures. This is the name given to many Neptunes that match the description of potential life-having planets. These planets tend to be fully composed of water with no continents, and often have permanent mist rising from the heated waters. Further research into exoplanets may reveal the truth to us within the next handful of years, as we develop and establish what we truly mean by habitable. Beyond Bennick from the University of Montreal claims that we as a species have far too high expectations, saying that there may be other ways of finding life that are not dinosaurs crawling around on the surface. Even though it's not the easiest thing to do, these mini-Neptunes can be tested. There are countless mini-Neptunes in space, and based on their positions and surroundings, we will be able to correctively guess whether they have a chance at being habitable or not. According to scientists, even if only 5% of the mean Neptunes match the requirements, it would still give scientists an incredible number of planets to investigate. The TRAPPIST-1 solar system is being studied closely by researchers in the hopes of finding more of these worlds. Dr. Nikki Mahudson from Cambridge's Institute of Astronomy said the following: "This result greatly expands our chances of finding life. By using the host R, astronomers are able to estimate the mass of an exoplanet to determine whether it's made of gas or rock, but it's near impossible to determine whether it has a solid or gas core. But in 2019, and thanks to the Hubble Space Telescope, astronomers were able to glimpse into the atmosphere of K2-18b, which has been labeled as one of these mini-Neptunes, and discovered evidence of clouds and water vapor. Just last year was announced that there's a possibility that one of these mini-Neptunes could have enough water to sustain earthly life. In Dr. Nikyu's words, for the first time we demonstrated that planets can be significantly larger than Earth and still have livable conditions. The desired outcome for astronomers is to find an Earth-like planet on which we could thrive, to find the ideal Earth in which unfortunately is much easier said than done. Considering this planet would be around the same mass as Earth, the same size orbit, are neither too far from the host stars the oceans would freeze, or too close for the oceans would boil. While planets such as K2-18b could surely have Earth-like life on them, it's hard to state. It is best not to assume that these planets' conditions would be suitable for humans. The task is to find alien life, not to find another suitable habitat for ourselves. These mini-Neptunes are in between being a gas giant and a rugged dwarf, small versions of our huge icy planets. Unfortunately, as mini-Neptunes are far from us, we have not developed a way to study them up close, thus shrouding them in mystery. So what do you make of these interesting discoveries? Our world is constantly changing, for better and for worse. As we have discovered more and more about our world, our past, and what else is out there, let us count down 3 interesting discoveries you may have missed. So today we'll be taking a look at 3 interesting changes for the better. Secret city has been found hiding below the Amazon jungle. The Inca society has left its mark on the pages of history, known as a distinctive group breaking expectations of old world civilizations. While many of us have heard of the Inca Empire, for those of us who are not quite history buffs, we will give you a reminder. The Incan people lived throughout the west of South America and made up the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. It was in the early 13th century that the Inca civilization grew from the Peruvian highlands. The empire flourished, making notable strides in architecture and religion, building roads mapping the way from Colombia to Argentina. That was the case until 1532, when the Spanish conquest began, with the final stronghold finally being conquered in 1572. Just because the Incas' timeline cuts off here does not mean this is when their historical significance also fell off. We are still finding incredible important details and discoveries about the Incas 8 centuries later. Today, the study of the Incas and their importance to the wider public is reduced to the tourist hotspots, most famously Machu Picchu, a 15th century Inca citadel found in Peru, though this is not the only Incan site of great importance. Archaeologists uncovered what has been dubbed a secret city, hiding within the Amazon jungle. This hidden masterpiece is the relatively unheard of settlement of Chiquinquirá. The 2009 documentary, Mysterious World of the Inca, dives into the importance of Chiquinquirá, which can only be reached by a 2-day hike from Cusco. This settlement was one of the last points of defense, protecting the Amazon from further than 18,000 square meters in. So far, an underwhelming 30% has been excavated, according to the previously mentioned documentary. All across the areas of land that were once part of the Incan Empire, there are unusual places described by the documentary narrator as strange and mysterious. These sites are called waka. They acted as idols, and some cultures of the period believed these areas had supernatural powers. Waka were one part of the Inca religious concept. While waka can refer to any sacred object, it was most often used to talk about the concepts of what would happen after the passing of life and to take part in sacred rituals. Waka can also refer to the spirits that are within or are themselves physical features, including waterfalls, lakes, distinctive stones, or even man-made shrines. Of course, it is not an accident that several Inca settlements and waka are hard to track down. The difficulty to access these sites and their disguised nature were intentional. As the Spanish aimed to conquer many areas like Choquequirá, it made sense the architecture of these tucked-away groups made this tricky to do. Many have said the hidden design of the Inca settlements is what let so many settlements avoid being conquered for so long. The 2009 documentary even suggested that in the instance of Choquequirá, the location might have served more of a practical value being secluded than a spiritual one of being a huacan. A lot of the unique history of the Inca has been written over and tampered by that of the conquests. It can often be difficult to find the line between the culture and achievements of the Inca and where the European invaders took over. In the case of the tucked-away, so-called lost settlements, the new groups arriving did not happen until much later. It was not until the mid-19th century that Choquequirá saw Europeans. This means we can clearly see the design features that were typical to the Inca, including the trapezoidal windows, the systems of canals, and the location and orientation of buildings. These small things all add up to create a more accurate picture of this advanced society, from the vegetation kept close to the home to the defense measures to hide from conquerors. Carbon dioxide confirmed on the moon. We are always looking for gases and compounds on other planets that resemble what we see on Earth. While we have heard many whispers of water on Mars that could indicate life, one lesser-heard conversation is that of carbon dioxide on the moon. Though after decades of theorizing and questioning, it seems as though we might have an answer. Researchers as of November 2021 seem to have found lunar carbon dioxide cold traps that could have solid carbon dioxide components. Some areas of our moon are constantly shadowed, shrouded in darkness with little impact from the sun in these areas. The temperatures can drop lower than those of Pluto. With such staggeringly low temperatures, cold traps are able to form. Cold traps are areas so cold that volatile substances can freeze and become solid. So why does it really make a difference if the CO2 is solid or not? If the carbon dioxide is solid, this means that it can be used to prolong lunar research. In the future, when we send explorers up, whether they are human or robotic, this solid carbon dioxide can provide the necessary materials for fuel and materials for longer expeditions. Furthermore, increasing our understanding of how volatile substances interact on the moon could help us with research into how water, amongst other elements and compounds, form and may appear on the moon. Despite this new research confirming the existence of and mapping out the areas for carbon dioxide cold traps, the idea of cold traps has been included in discussions and predictions by planetary scientists for years. To begin confirming these theories and suggestions, researchers used 11 years' worth of temperature data from the Divina Lunar Radiometer experiment, a high-tech piece of equipment aboard NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. The 2021 research published in the AGU journal Geophysical Research Letters shows that a number of the cold traps are focused on the lunar South Pole. They span 204 square kilometers. The most concentrated area is in the Amundsen crater, which is home to 84 square kilometers of cold traps. Here, the temperatures never seem to exceed 60 Kelvin, which is about minus 0.5352 degrees Fahrenheit. Despite the exciting and promising aspects of this discovery, it is important to remember that just because there are cold traps on the moon does not mean that there are solid forms of carbon dioxide, just that there could potentially be. Norbert Schorghofer, a planetary scientist at the Planetary Science Institute and the lead author of this study, said, "My surprise was that the cold traps are actually definitely there. There are plenty of missions to track down aspects of research that go by unsuccessfully, with years of more studying before being able to confirm any of the theories at all. This research continues to be highly promising. While at the moment all we can confirm is the existence of cold traps, it will not be long before these discoveries have much greater, more practical applications, from rocket fuel to finding water." Supersaurus was the longest dinosaur to walk the Earth. Jurassic Park fans, this discovery is bound to pique your interest. We all love dinosaurs, from the stories told on the big screen to their bones in the museum. Dinosaurs are bound to have caught your eye at one point or another. Now, though, scientists believe that a new sequencing of fossils could have led them to the longest dinosaur that had walked the Earth. The dinosaur has been dubbed Supersaurus, thanks to its excessive length. The current estimation is that these dinosaurs would range between 128 to 137 feet in length, according to research presented at the annual Society of Vertebrate Paleontology Conference. To put this staggering size into perspective, this could make the dinosaur longer than a 13-story building is tall, longer than a blue whale, longer than 3 school buses, and longer than a Boeing 737 aircraft. The sheer size of this beast does sound monstrous, though evidence suggests that the Supersaurus was a herbivore. The National History Museum's timeline places the species in the early Cretaceous period, between 154 and 142 million years in the past. However, as with many areas of scientific study, there is a great deal of doubt and uncertainty surrounding the title of longest dinosaur in the world. More often than not, dinosaur bones are found in sections, fragments, and fossils that all have to be pieced together like a jigsaw puzzle. Brian Curtis, a paleontologist at the Arizona Museum of Natural History, explained that all it takes is for a few pieces of the bone to not have been discovered, and then the entire measurement needs to be shifted. This makes it impossible to accurately determine the height, length, or really any dimensions in relation to these dinosaurs. In the case of the Supersaurus, fossils were muddled up with some others, forming one confusing aspect to many other works in progress. Now that these bones have been rightly relocated, they, alongside a recently excavated set of fossils, show researchers a more accurate idea as to the length of the Supersaurus. Whilst there is still room for the Supersaurus to grow as more bones are found, or shrink, if we have misplaced some, it is always exciting to gain a clearer image of the world that came before us. We have exciting, interesting discoveries taking place every day, from delving into our past, be it the Incas or the dinosaurs, to diving into the future of space exploration. The research and groundbreaking ideas continue to push us forward. And what do you make of these three interesting discoveries? There is so much around us that is just waiting to be discovered. From a deep dive under the surface, exploring the ocean floors, to looking up and beyond into outer space, taking a look at distant planets and far-off galaxies, there are tons of discoveries yet to be uncovered all over the world. So today, we will be diving into three discoveries from the very depths of the ocean to exoplanets light years away. Thousands of massive holes have been found on the ocean floor off the Californian coast. California is a thrilling place. From LA to the beach, there is plenty going on, to say the least. The abundance of things to do does not end at the coastline, however, as there is something worth checking out in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Big Sur. While some investigation is needed, it is certainly nothing like the high street shopping or beachside fun. Puzzling series of holes in the ocean floor, and we are not sure how they got there. You might not have answers as to how these holes got into the ocean floor. It is clear that these newly formed spaces are popular hideouts for a number of marine life species. Plenty of small seafloor animals have made themselves at home in these dark spaces, turning the mystery holes into shelters. Are from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, and they uncovered a staggering 15,000 unexplained holes in the seafloor. These are not small circles on the floor. These are large, noticeable holes. The average gap spanned 11 meters in diameter and 1 meter in depth. 30% of the pits had human rubbish within them. Not only were the fish living in the holes, but also living within and alongside the rubbish carelessly tossed by neglectful humans. A further 20% found items like stones, kelp holdfast, and one even had a whale skull within it, though sediment that was found surrounding the holes remains empty. The research team was able to discover that these holes exist at all only due to another survey being conducted. The initial survey aimed to study underwater features known as pockmarks. These are bigger dents in the ocean floor, though they are significantly bigger than these holes, clocking in at an average 175 meters wide and 5 meters deep. POC marks are significantly easier to research as they can be seen, detected, and identified on ship-mounted sonar. This makes observations and data much simpler to obtain, and so we have known POC marks lie in the ocean floor since a 1999 survey. The pockmarks we know of cover 1,300 square kilometers of the seafloor in the coast of Big Sur, with about 5,200 pockmarks accounting for this space. Despite knowing about pockmarks for much longer than these newly found holes, we still do not have any inkling as to what causes either to occur. The Big Sur coast has been considered for an offshore wind farm, and so before any further discussions could go ahead regarding that, more investigation into the odd holes was necessary. One theory suggests that the holes are the result of gases like methane bubbling out from underneath the seafloor. If this were true, this would be vital information when it came to the placement of the wind turbines. The Mbari team deployed underwater vehicles to see what more could be found. These robots were automated and fully decked out with sonar devices. As had been predicted, and even more unexpectedly, there was no evidence of the pockmarks having been active at all over the last 50,000 years. Still, the mission was useful as this was how the team found the other holes, smaller than the pockmarks. The sonar from the ship had not allowed these to be seen. They had become clearly visible in this new data collection. The next step was to deploy remotely operated vehicles fitted with cameras to take another look. To help differentiate these holes from the much larger pockmarks, the team has begun to refer to them as microdepressions. The initial observations here seem to suggest that the microdepressions have been formed much more recently than the pockmarks, have steeper sides, and they have trails of sediment. The team has speculated that the animals living in the rubbish and other items within the depressions could be carving into the holes, making them larger over time. The researchers wrote in their paper, "These observations imply that marine trash is at least partly responsible for approximately 4,500 of the 15,000 microdepressions and provide some clues as to how these microdepressions are created. The current hypothesis is that an item, whether that is a whale skull or a few items of rubbish, fall and settle on the seafloor. Marine life then decides it seems like a comfy place to set up, moves in, and begins to live in and around said item. Their movement disturbs the sediment, meaning a small divot is made in the seafloor from which the microdepressions are eventually formed. This is just a hypothesis and one example that would fit under this explanation. One flaw here, however, is that some of the microdepressions do not seem to have any items, be that rubbish, skulls, or anything similar within them, and this theory does not account for those items. For now, however, have confirmed that the microdepressions and the pockmarks are different things, not just different sizes of the same phenomenon. This is due to a lack of subsea exoplanet 2M0437b. We have so many fantastic creations here on Earth that it can be difficult to remember everything else that is out there. Scientists have so much to investigate and research beyond our planet that it can be impossible for the general public to know what research to follow. It is always exciting, however, when new planets are discovered in different galaxies and solar systems. These are exoplanets, and researchers hope their study can help us understand more about the origins of the universe, how Earth formed, and if other planets could support life the same way Earth can. Of course, a key aspect to the study of exoplanets is learning how they form and studying their early development, though this is easier said than done. One exoplanet first discovered in 2018, 2M0437b, is thought to be incredibly young. As far as planets go, giving great opportunities for researchers to probe a little further into its origins. This exoplanet is estimated to be just a few million years old. By comparison, our solar system's planets are 4.5 billion years old. The young age of this exoplanet has led scientists to speculate that this is still as hot as lava, with the high surface temperature being put down to its recent formation and the energy that was released during this process. The baby exoplanet was spotted using the Subaru telescope when it managed to capture a stunning shot of the planet reflected in its star's light. The Subaru telescope is based in Hawaii at the summit of the Mauna Kea volcano, but is operated from Japan by the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan. Some initial research showed that 2M0437b is very large, multiple Jupiters in size in fact, as well as revealing the sky-high temperatures of the planet. Professionals have noted that being able to directly observe the planet provides us several opportunities, meaning we can look at the composition, helping us see where and how it formed, as well as observing the gravitational orbital tonics on the parent stars. There is plenty more research opportunities waiting to be explored. GJ1132b, there are lots of unique and awesome things about planet Earth that goes without saying, but the atmosphere might not be the first thing you think of. However, for those of us who are a bit more into our science, the atmosphere is a big deal. Until 2017, scientists had not found any planets the same size as us here on Earth with an atmosphere. That is until exoplanet GJ1132b was discovered. Scientists found an atmosphere around this exoplanet which is just 1.4 times the size of Earth. The study published in the astronomical journal detailed the findings of the atmosphere discovery. The observations from the research team suggested that the planet had a thick layer of gases. The initial findings thought of this as either water, methane, or both making up this atmosphere. Whilst the 370 degrees Celsius temperatures is not reassuring in this instance, being able to find, detect, and analyze the atmospheres of exoplanets is a good way to begin to assess whether that planet could support life. GJ1132b is not a likely contender to be home to life. Being able to detect atmospheres could prove useful in other planetary studies, however. What do you make of these recent discoveries? Archaeologists have revealed that Brazil would have been a hive for ancient civilizations, saying that it's only been in the last few years that researchers have gathered enough data to make this assumption. Early explorers at the Amazon would talk about passing huge settlements and seeing lots of people in Brazil. Oddly enough, though, within a few generations, all of these people vanished. Although Brazil has a rich culture, the country is becoming known for something entirely different. For the last few years now, people have been recording strange crafts, detailing that they don't match things like planes or helicopters, and that they have the ability to just hover motionless in the sky without making a sound. The sightings have only increased in recent years, which has led people to label Brazil as somewhat of a hotspot. Some of the recent photographs to emerge show what appear to be V-shaped or boomerang crafts with glowing lines. The individual who filmed the craft is sitting in traffic, but you can see that the object barely moves while it's being recorded. A local by the name of Marcelino, who is in one of the nearby casts, said that this has been happening for a while now, and that only a few nights ago he was able to capture a similar-looking craft, but detailed that the one that he saw was a little bigger. He said that his encounter happened early in the morning and said that these things are becoming quite frequent throughout the area, leading some to suggest that sightings of these crafts are on the rise. Alex Mossio commented on the post and said that he too had a similar encounter, but said that his happened a few days before this on January 6th at 2,213 hours, close to Chicologo Beach in Chile. He said that the object suddenly approached the bay heading north-south before fading into darkness turning southwest. He said that he has videos of the event and plans to upload them. Alicia Rosa detailed that last year she had seen one of these crafts above her house and said that this thing didn't make a sound and said that if she had to guess, she would estimate that this object was twice the size of a standard airplane. In the comments section, there were hundreds of people that detailed that they'd seen the same thing. But as of right now, no one has come forward and answered what it is that people are seeing down in Brazil. Mr. Santos said the following: "How can something so big just sit in the sky like that? We don't have anything that matches these descriptions. No plane or helicopter looks like this. If this was something from our military, why'd they hover it over a main road? To me, I just don't think that our military would do something like this. Normally, they're doing everything they can to keep out of the way of evil. Yet, you have this thing that just sits in the sky making no noise. What is this thing?" End quote. Something that many aren't aware of is that hostile incidents were reported throughout Brazil during the 1970s and 80s. According to several Brazilian police officials, on the 29th of September back in 1988, a body was found near the Guaporanga Reservoir in Brazil by police technician Sergei Rubens, who began taking photographs of the incident and believed the discovery to have been slightly strange in nature. According to Sergei Rubens, there was a list of striking observations that were made that pointed to the event being far more supernatural than a typical police investigation would expect. Although the pictures are far too graphic to show in detail here on YouTube, several images were taken by Sergio Rubens that showcase the body in similar condition as reported in past livestock parsings. According to his report, the body gave off no smells despite having been deceased for an expected 42 to 78 hours, with no evidence of sun or rot or having been eaten by wild animals nearby the region, of which appear to stay away from the body entirely for some unknown reason. The body's lips, ears, eyes, tongue, and parts of the face had been completely removed with surgical precision. There was little bleeding on or around the body despite the large and numerous wounds covering the body. The major organs within the chest cavity had been removed through a perfectly round small hole that could have been made only with the use of precise surgical instruments, as the holes were perfectly neat and half an inch in diameter. The organs associated with reproduction and digestion were completely taken out and removed, and this was done with extreme precision. And lastly, the body appeared to have been subjected to high doses of radiation, with evidence of burns and radiation scorches all over the surface of the skin. The police dismissed that anything strange had happened and labeled this as a natural passing. Oddly enough, a few officers from the region had come forward in subsequent years and detailed that in the past, during the years between the 1970s and 80s, FAIR's reports were coming in from different parts of Brazil that detailed that residents had been attacked by strange crafts, noting that it got so bad that residents would roam the night in order to get to the bottom of what was causing these mysterious attacks. The Fenomeno Chupa happened in the northeastern part of the country along with places in the Amazon, and those affected described being attacked by small prows or orbs that would approach them during the night. The probes would also go on to leave small scars on the victims, proof that something did happen and that residents weren't making up the stories. One resident by the name of Luis Fernandez was attacked by one of these proms, and those close to him said that he suffered greatly, noting that doctors found high traces of metals within his system, and that something had caused his brain to completely shut down. Just a few months before his passing, His brain was compared to that of a child's. The Brazilian Air Force concluded that after thorough investigation, they found nothing out of the ordinary. So what do you make of these reports coming out of Brazil? Back in 2018, Sunspot's solar observatory in New Mexico was investigated over an 11-day period. The closure of the Sunspot Solar Observatory led to many theories being put forward as to why it was shut down. The reason behind the closure was so that officials could carry out an official investigation into the janitor that was working there, saying that the individual was using the observatories. Since this has come out, though, other people who have connections to this event have spoken out. The individual who was in charge of shutting down the facility told the chief observer at the facility that they'd found something, and that the things that were being searched for via the observatory's Wi-Fi were not good. The investigators were able to track all of this activity, knew where the individual lived, and could see the tougher things that they were. The laptop was eventually confiscated, and the solar observatory was closed for almost 2 weeks. Since this happened, though, people have spoken out about this, with some of those being a former NASA employee, and also someone whose dad was part of the raid. However, people online couldn't seem to connect the dots, and said that the events that played out were unnecessary. One person said the following: "Why would you need to close down an observatory for almost 2 weeks if you knew who the individual was, knew where they lived, and also had an activity log on what they were doing? Why not go to their house directly, or catch them as they were walking to their car? Why close the observatory down for almost a 2-week period? Feels like we aren't being told the full story." End quote. This individual said that their dad was part of the race, saying the following: "My dad was part of the raid, and he told me that no one there knew what was going on. He told me that different people knew bits and pieces, but everyone was sworn to secrecy about what happened that day. My dad to this day hasn't told any of us the real reason why they were there, but did say that something is happening with his son that's led to it being observed more closely." End quote. Interestingly, during this event something did happen with the sun. Amateur sky watchers noticed that strange objects could be seen close to our sun, with many of them being able to capture photographs of this event, leading them to ask whether this was the real reason why the observatory had been closed down in the first place, in fear that it would cause people to panic and question what these things were. Although scientists denied these claims and said that the observatory wasn't close for this reason, people did go on to share their photographs of the sun, along with highlighting the strange objects. One event that did happen was 2 lunar transits, with NASA saying the following on their website. NASA's Solar Dynamics Observatory saw 2 lunar transits as the moon passed in front of the sun. A transit happens when a celestial body passes between a larger body and an observer. This first lunar transit lasted 1 hour and obscured 92% of the sun at the peak of its journey. The second transit happened several hours later at 9:52 p.m. and lasted a total of 49 minutes. The moon appears to go in one direction and then switches direction to cross the moon again. The moon does not, of course, actually change direction, but it appears to do so from the Solar Dynamics Observatory perspective, based on the fact that the spacecraft's orbit essentially catches up and passes the moon during the first transit. End quote. Interestingly, during this time it became apparent that 6 more solar observatories had been shut down, including Australia, Chile, Spain, 2 in Hawaii and Pennsylvania. All of their cameras were down at the same time during the solar observatory's closure. While the solar observatory was shut, one resident by the name of Maria photographed something incredible next to the sun, describing it as a massive craft that looked like a disc. This strange object was also surrounded by what appeared to be hundreds of smaller objects. When she uploaded these photographs, it led many to suggest that this may have been the real reason for why the observatory was shut down, with believers saying that this would be something that they wouldn't want the public seeing. One person said the following about these photographs: "What if they closed it because they didn't want people to see these things close to our sun? We still haven't got an answer for why they decided to close it for so long." Well, this person said this: "Something that often gets missed about this story is the fact that they closed down the nearby post office. Now, to me, the only reason why they would do this is to prevent information from getting out. People that work close to the area have told me that pretty much everything was shut down and that they didn't want anything getting out. I wonder if they shut it down for so long because they had to do the rounds and tell everyone to be quiet about what was going on. Why else would you shut everything down? End quote. Other people speculated that it may have had something to do with Space Force, suggesting that they may have been conducting space activities that they didn't want people knowing about. As of right now, there's still many unanswered questions. Why did they shut down the observatory for so long? Why did they close the post office? Why were 6 of us, so the observatories temporarily shut down while all of this was going on? What do Maria's photographs show? Could this be the reason why all of this happened? Maybe they thought they could have closed these observatories down without bringing too much attention to themselves. As of right now, there's still many unanswered questions. And in many people's opinion, the reason it was temporarily shut down remains a mystery. So why do you think the solar observatory was closed for an 11-day period? Memorandum 6751 is an interesting document that was released online by the FBI. It's hard to find, but the document was released along with thousands of others. But this one is a little different, as it goes into detail about mysterious beings, sophisticated technologies, and also portals. The document was released in 2015 and is being used by researchers into the unknown as proof that we know of other beings. The document reads as follows. San Diego, California, July 8, 1947. A memorandum of importance. This memorandum is respectfully addressed to certain scientists, or distinction to important astronomical and military authorities, to a number of public officials and publications. The writer has little expectation that everything of importance will be accomplished by this gesture. Nevertheless, it seems a public duty to make it available. The present writer has several university degrees and was head of a university department. A very serious situation may develop at any time with regard to the flying saucers. If one of those should be attacked, the attacking plane will almost certainly be destroyed. In the public mind, this might create near panic and international suspicion. Principal data concerning these crafts is now at hand and must be offered, no matter how fantastic and unintelligible it may seem to mind. 1. Part of the discs carry crews. Others are under remote control. 2. Their mission is peaceful. The visitors contemplate settling on this planet. 3. These visitors are human-like, but much larger in size. 4. They come from their own world. 5. They do not come from any planet as we use this word, but from another place which interpenetrates with our own and is not perceivable to us. 6. The bodies of the visitors and the craft also automatically materialize on entering the vibratory ratio of our dense matter. 7. The disk possesses a type of radiant energy or array, which will easily disintegrate any attacking ship. They re-enter the Earth at will, and so simply disappear from our vision without a trace. 8. The region from which they come from is not the astral plane, but corresponds to the lokes or tails. Students of this matter will understand these terms. 9. They probably cannot be reached by radio, but probably can be by radar. If a signal system can be devised for that, we give information and warnings and can do no more. Let the newcomers be treated with every kindness. Unless the discs that we've drawn are redacted with which our culture and science are incapable of redacted. A heavy responsibility rests upon those who are in authority to understand this matter. An interview with an individual named Billy featured on the next page, in which it details a boy called Billy who happened to photograph one of these strange objects, and which details that afterwards a strange agent decided to pay him a visit. The document reads as follows. The photograph in this clipping is alleged to represent a flying disc, which was observed by Billy Tannenstein, a Norfolk schoolboy who was successful in photographing this object with his small camera. Billy was interviewed on August 8, 1947 by Special Agent Redacted, at which time Billy informed that the original negative was given by him to a Mr. Brown of the Photo Craftsman Service. Billy advised that he had an agreement with Mr. Brown, whereby the latter will share equally in any profits derived from the use of the negatives by commercial films or newspapers. As of August 1947, Billy's not received any payment for the use of this negative. He informed me he was sitting on the front porch of his apartment, which is located on the third floor of 410 West. He'd read numerous newspaper articles pertaining to flying sources and decided to sit on his porch in the hopes of seeing one and attempting to photograph it. On July 8, 1947, Billy observed a large black object moving rapidly through space proceeding from the southwest to the northeast direction. He said the black object was followed by two smaller objects, which also proceeded in the same direction. Billy explained that the objects were moving at a very fast speed, which appeared to him to be much faster than the speed of an airplane, and further that the objects appeared to be extremely high. He said they were much higher than the average plane travels in the city of Norfolk, and appeared to be above the clouds. Billy was unable to state what the black objects represented. He said, though, that the objects were at such a great distance from him that it was not necessary that he had to raise his head in order to see them from his porch. He immediately turned around to obtain his camera and established that it took him approximately 20 seconds, at which time the discs were almost directly above his apartment. And it was necessary that his stoop and lock up almost perpendicular in order to obtain the photograph, which accounts for the portrayalings being shown. Billy pointed out that the day on which he took the photograph the weather was hazy and somewhat cloudy. End quote. After this, Billy went on to say that once the object got closer he could see that it was blank and in the shape of a disc. What's interesting about these documents is that there's so many of them that detail the same thing. Strange crafts that have been observed by researchers and scientists. It's documents like this that have led people to say that we've been studying this craft for nearly 100 years now. Yet the public has still been kept in the dark about what these things are, where they're coming from, and how they're able to achieve the things they do. In fact, just recently government officials said they'll open another program in order to understand and study what these crafts are. People have said that these officials are starting to acknowledge that these things exist, but go on to mention that they could be more transparent with people. It's fair to say that this topic is still very much shrouded in mystery. So what you make of these interesting stories? Back in the winter months of 1972, two police officers from Loveland, Ohio would experience individual encounters with an impossible-to-explain humanoid creature that would change the future of their careers forever. Known as the Loveland Frogman, this 4-foot-tall frog-like monster would be sighted throughout the small town over the course of several decades, eventually resulting in a special investigation involving the FBI in possible connections with mysterious flying aircraft throughout the region. But what do the police encounters back in 1972 tell us about the creature? And why would the officers involved end up having to deny that the events ever took place to begin with? Although sightings of the Loveland Frogman would begin in the mid-1950s, according to the first officer's report, the Loveland Frogman police encounters event would first take place on the 3rd of March back in 1972, when an officer by the name of Ray Schock would have a strange encounter with frog-like humanoid entities at around 1 in the morning. As Ray Schock was driving down Riverside Road towards the town of Loveland, he was making a slow turn into town on an icy road, when he noticed what he described as a small humanoid creature laying at the side of the road, close to the intersection of Twitty Road. Originally believing that the creature was a dog lying down in the snow, the officer slowed down to check on the animal to see if it was okay, when he realized that the creature was not a dog. Suddenly the creature rose out of the ground and stood up on 2 legs, and appeared to have been some type of humanoid animal impossible to identify. The officer estimated that the creature most likely stood at around 4 feet tall and weighed between 50 to 75 pounds at most. Its body lacked any type of hair or fur, and was instead covered in a bumpy, leathery skin that would foldably smooth in different areas. The most bizarre features that the animal had, however, was its strange head that appeared to be the mix of a frog or a lizard face, with legs that appeared to be longer than its arms. Once the officer made direct contact with the creature, the frog-like entity jumped up onto the car, then ran towards the guardrail that wrapped around the road and jumped off the ledge, running into the nearby woods and waterways, passing over the embankment and disappearing into the Miami River. Frightened by the sighting, Officer Ray Shockey immediately drove to the Loveland police station and reported the encounter to fellow police officer Mark Matthews. After describing his encounter in detail, Mark Matthews refused to believe the encounter, and so drove back to the site of the encounter with Ray Shockey to find further evidence of the event. Once the two officers returned, tracks leading down into the embankment became apparent, and scratch marks located on the guardrail led Matthews to believe that a large animal must have damaged the rail. Officer Mark Matthews himself would have his own encounter with the Loveland Frogman. According to a report made by Officer Matthews, on the 17th of March back in 1972, Mark Matthews was driving along the road leading out of Loveland when he spotted what he originally believed was an animal lying on the side of the road. Fearing that the body could cause an accident, Officer Matthews pulled out to the side of the road and got out his car in the hopes of dragging the carcass out from the middle of the road. Once Matthews stepped out his car, however, the creature immediately stood up and stared at the officer intently. According to Matthews, the creature appeared exactly like how Officer Ryoshoki had described his encounter, standing roughly 4 feet tall, with leathery skin and the head of a frog. The only additional difference that Mark Matthews noticed was that the creature appeared to have had a long, levy tail similar to a lizard's. As the two stared at each other, the creature made a sudden move towards the officer, scaring him into pulling out his weapon and firing at the entity. Although the officer fired several rounds, either the officer missed each shot or the bullets had no effect on the animal, as it ran away and leapt over the guardrail, disappearing into the nearby waterways. Matthews would later describe in his reports that he believed that someone had hit the animal prior to his encounter, given the fact that it appeared to have moved with a limp and was found in the middle of the road incapacitated when he first spotted it. Unfortunately for both officers Ray Shock and Mark Matthews, their official police reports of spotting the strange Loveland Frogman would end up causing a great deal of ridicule on their part, affecting their careers and public images for the rest of their lives. Despite the many interviews insisting that the creature appeared to be a 4-foot humanoid frog-like entity, with drawings of the creature confirmed by both officers, the officers were later changed their story to avoid ridicule, and claimed that they'd witnessed nothing more than a pet iguana that must have escaped captivity. It's uncertain whether or not the officers changed their story to avoid ridicule, or due to outside forces requiring their cooperation in order to downplay the events. The officers wouldn't be alone in their reports, however. It's during the same month as the Loveland Police Department sightings. A farmer claimed to have directly encountered frog-like or lizard-like humanoid creatures that were seen wandering through his farm that resided adjacent to the Little Miami River. Although the dates surrounding the incident are not specific, the farmer recalled that the events happened sometime in March of 1972 and believed that the creatures were some undiscovered native species to the area, given how they walked around the farm and were near the open waters. According to the farmer, the creature stood around 3 to 4 feet in height, had greenish skin with large bulging eyes that almost appeared as if they were popping out of their heads. The farmer also described that the creatures had large mouths that appeared to be filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. As the farmer attempted to approach the creatures, he watched as they ran off into the Little Miami River and disappeared into the nearby waterways, submerging into the water and vanishing from sight. Several days later, following the incident, the farmlord claimed to have seen the creatures once more standing around the river embankments. This was as he was riding his bike into town. Due to having seen the creatures multiple times near the river, he assumed that the creatures must have been a native large amphibious species, similar to an alligator or a lizard of some kind. Unfortunately, since their initial sightings, next to nothing is known about the creatures, except for the fact that many eyewitnesses complain of time loss after encountering the creatures, a trait commonly associated with mysterious flying aircrafts. So what do you make of these strange encounters? Earthquakes have always happened, and while some of us lucky enough to live away from the edges of tectonic plates, the horror stories of earthquakes stay only on the news. For others, the damages caused are very real, tangible, and severe. An earthquake happens when the edges of tectonic plates get stuck as a result of friction. There is then a slip on a fault, the fracture between the rocks that let them move relative to one another. These huge events can be catastrophic. And so, of course, plenty of research has gone into understanding earthquakes, how they happen, what we can do to prepare, and the impact of them. So today, we will be taking a look at 3 discoveries made about earthquakes. San Andreas Fault is ready for a major earthquake. There are several countries in the world that we know are particularly prone to severe earthquakes, including Japan, China, and Iran. A number of American states are also up there for experiencing bad earthquakes, and nearing the top of that list is California. In California, the 750-mile-long San Andreas Fault, the fault that makes up the tectonic boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. To help to figure out the long-term slip rate of the San Andreas Fault, meaning the speed at which the 2 sides of the fault slip relative to one another. Following these observations, it has been estimated that the San Andreas Fault will have a major earthquake comparable to that it experienced in 1906, every 200 years. It takes time for an earthquake to build up a slip that will result in a 20-foot offset, meaning that there is a small chance that this will happen within 30 years. To be precise, the Working Group on California Earthquake Probabilities said approximately a 2% chance. This does not mean the San Francisco Bay Area is immune from earthquakes. There is still a chance that significant earthquakes will happen, with predictions suggesting before 2032, a major earthquake will occur, though it simply will not be as large as the one in 1906 for another 100 years or so. California scientists discover new type of earthquake. Until 2016, when scientists uncovered a new, more destructive type of earthquake, we thought we understood the mechanics behind the natural disaster. We believed that earthquakes occurred in the top half of the planet's crust as a result of friction built up over time as the tectonic plates rub against one another. This is true for most earthquake events and isn't inaccurate, though it appears that worse fates could be on the horizon. A research team based in Southern California found evidence that an earthquake can occur from a much deeper level than we had thought, more than 15 miles deep, placing the seismic event in the upper mantle of the Earth, not in the crust at all. A reminder for those of us who might need brushing up on our high school geography, the Earth's structure is made up of the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. The crust is the solid outer layer of the Earth. And the mantle is mostly solid, almost entirely solid rock, unlike the liquid outer core, which is then followed by the solid innermost layer of the Earth, the inner core. Scientists had made the assumption that earthquakes can begin just 12 to 15 miles below the Earth's surface, as any deeper and we begin to make our way to the mantle. Due to the high temperatures and solid state of the mantle, researchers operated under the assumption that the mantle is solid, that the seismic activity could not build up and develop in these conditions. These expectations all shifted, however, when a Caltech team used the most powerful seismic sensors available. The Caltech team from Pasadena, California, picked up small earthquakes using the previously mentioned seismic sensors as they moved across the Newport-Inglewood fault line further than the anticipated 15 miles, breaking the surface into the upper mantle. This seemingly small difference marks a significant discovery. This is a new, never-before-seen type of earthquake. So what does this mean? Earthquakes are devastating. Homes are destroyed, lives taken, jobs lost. Though there seems to be only bad news to come. Scientists have predicted that this new type of earthquake means that future earthquakes can become even larger, leaving even more damage in their wake. One of the researchers, Jean-Paul, one way of achieving that is by penetrating deep. It continues to elaborate that the fact that the earthquakes can penetrate the Earth deeper than we thought possible means that they could catch us off guard, getting larger than we would expect and bigger than we are prepared for. Since both the Newport-Inglewood fault line and the San Andreas fault line are the same category of fault, it is reasonable to assume that the longest fault line in California, San Andreas, stretching for 750 miles, is also capable of producing these deeper earthquakes. This research follows the 2012 earthquake that struck the Indian Ocean near Sumatra, a huge earthquake clocking in at a staggering magnitude 8.6. And Bureau mentioned that this was the biggest earthquake of this type to have ever happened. This fault is known as the strike slip, which, again, much like Newport Inglewood, is the same type as San Andreas. The team began to delve deeper into just how the 2012 Sumatra earthquake was able to happen, figuring out that these deeper quakes break into the mantle. So far, there are not many definitive answers. While scientists are guessing that these deep earthquakes will be much more dangerous and more extreme, there are others who say that this is all simply blown out of proportion, and the deep earthquakes may just be small and localized, not expanding or connecting with one another and therefore leaving the surface somewhat undisturbed. If this is correct, it means we would see a series of tiny earthquakes, but never one big one. Amburo said, "I wouldn't say that this is cause for alarm at this point. These are very interesting questions that we need to pursue. We don't yet know whereabouts in the planet these earthquakes can occur, whether they will play out in one large disastrous blow or lots of smaller, more manageable waves. For now, researchers continue to dig deeper, finding as much information as they can. Until then, we will have to wait and see just how these earthquakes begin to play out. Earthquakes can actually help trees grow. Plenty will rush to tell you that the trunk of a tree can tell you its life. Count the rings of the tree to see how old it is, and look at how the rings are patterned to see what the weather and climate was like in each year of its life. Though a tree can tell us an awful lot more too. 2021 studies have delved deeper into the impact of earthquakes on tree growth. Could these horrific natural disasters have a silver lining after all? To propose that earthquakes impact the geographical space, leaving its aftermath on trees and surrounding nature, not just ruining homes and villages. The idea that earthquakes can somehow help the trees grow is a somewhat novel suggestion. The basic premise is that the earthquakes shake up the ground, increasing water levels. This in turn then increases the water levels above the ground that the trees can then absorb. This feeds into plants and trees in environments very little access to water, removing the limiting factors that usually inhibit growth. The research team led by the first author and hydrologist, Christian Mohr from the University of Potsdam in Germany said, "If tree growth is limited mainly by water, trees should in theory record hydrological responses to earthquakes by changing their growth rates. This would mean that by reading over the story of the tree's trunk and looking out for the volume are due to earthquakes." This premise was investigated using pine trees in Chile, looking at the aftermath of the 8.8 magnitude earthquake that hit in 2010. The hypothesis was that the changes earthquakes would make to the groundwater supply would encourage tree growth when trees are close to valley streams and hinder or prevent this growth when they are on hillsides. The tree cores were taken in 2014, and an analysis of them has since been revealing that some valley trees did see a temporary but significant increase in growth following the earthquake, though those on the slope of the hill struggled following the earthquake for the same duration of time. During their analysis, the team found some of their evidence of increased hydration through the tree rings. They credited an increased lumen area to a greater volume of water for the purposes of the study. Other measurement devices were the ratio of carbon isotopes in the cells of the tree, as this provided an insight into the health, growth, and water availability, and at a cellular level, a far more intricate measurement than seen before. Despite the excitement following the initial claim that earthquakes help trees to grow, the team did find that the effects only lasted for a few weeks. Even so, the case study looking at the lumen area and isotope ratios could prove to be useful for further research and future studies too. Earthquakes can be frightening, though the more we research and understand, the better prepared we can be to help us all to stay as safe as possible. But what do you make of these scientific discoveries? The earliest known reports of dogman encounters across North America would first be reported near the small town of Elkhorn, Wisconsin, after a series of sightings were made featuring a creature later referred to by the town as the Beast of Bay Road. Although this strange creature is now recorded as one of the most well-known creatures of the area, the original encounters and legends of the creature dating back to the later 82nds and early 90s contain eerie similarities with more commonly reported dogman sightings of more recent years. On the night of the 31st of October back in 1999, a young 18-year-old woman known as Doris Dean Gibson reportedly witnessed what she described as a bipedal humanoid creature covered from head to toe and further wrapped around its entire body. According to the eyewitnesses, She had been driving along Wisconsin's Bray Road, a long stretch of road that resides roughly 3 miles east of the town of Elkhorn, Wisconsin. As she was driving along the road, she claimed to have seen several animals running at the side of the street, most likely fleeing a large predator in the area. Once she reached the intersection of Bray Road and Hospital Road, the movements of the animal and the surrounding empty streets gave her a sudden extreme sense of anxiety. And so she began to mess with her car radio to find some music that could help ease her stress. As her attention was turned away from the street for a fraction of a second, the young girl claimed to have felt the car jump slightly and heard a loud thud as if her right front wheel had run over a small animal that was scurrying across the street. Worried that she could have possibly hit a small child, as the 31st of October was the night of Halloween, the young 18-year-old woman pulled over to the side of the road. Stepping out in the almost complete darkness of the night, Dorothy took the time to look around and inspect the road, though was completely unable to find any trace of her accident. Fearing that her car tire could have been misaligned and created the jerking motion, the young woman also took the time to analyze the car, but was unable to find any dents, scratch marks of misalignment that could have caused the strange thudding sound. It was at this moment in time, as Dorothy was preparing to get back into her car, that she claimed to have noticed what she described as a 6-foot-tall, huge, bulky creature that stood several yards down the road staring back at her. Unsure of what she was seeing, the woman and the creature stood motionless for some time as they watched each other in total silence. The creature suddenly began charging towards the direction of Dorothy, as she heard the pattering of its feet loudly striking the ground. Without a second's hesitation, the young woman re-entered her car, slammed the door shut, and immediately started her car's engine to speed away. Unfortunately, the car could not start up fast enough, and the creature started to climb on the trunk and slammed against the car's metal frame with several thudding blows. Within a few seconds, however, the car soon sped away, causing the strange humanoid creature to fall off the car and allowing Dorothy Gibson to make a clean getaway. Shortly thereafter, Dorothy arrived at one of her friends' houses, with whom she had planned to go trick-or-treating with. Fearing that the other girl would not believe her story, Dorothy failed to bring up her encounter with the strange humanoid creature. Believing that her story would have been shrugged off as nothing more than a made-up Halloween tale, Dorothy then planned that perhaps she would be able to encounter the creature again that night, if she returned to the original location where the sighting had occurred. As the two girls approached the area of Dorothy's original sighting, they claimed to have seen the dark form of the creature standing at the side of the road. According to her friend, the creature appeared to have been a fur-covered humanoid creature that walked with a slight limp. The following morning, the two girls would come forward with their sightings to their friends, family, and neighbors, who would all wish to examine the car for proof of their claims. Once examining the car, however, it became apparent that Dorothy did encounter some creature, as the trunk appeared to have had deep scratches, impossible to have been made by a person, and seemed to have been something out of a horror movie. Although Gibson and the other girl claimed to have possibly encountered a Sasquatch creature, many residents of Wisconsin soon came forward with their stories about an unknown humanoid creature that helped to shed light on the encounter. They failed to actually explain what was exactly stalking the nearby town of Elkhorn. One such witness testimony would come from an older woman named Lorraine Ditzy, who claimed to have spotted a similar creature back during the fall of 1989. According to Lorraine, she had been working as the manager of a local business, forcing her to stay late so that she could close up. On her way home, she decided to take a less popular use route back to her house and follow the Bray Road out of town. As Lorraine was roughly a half a mile west of Hospital Road, she claimed to have spotted what she originally believed was a person crouching at the side of the road. Worried that the person could have been lost and needed a ride, Lorraine began to slow down as she approached the figure. At first, she noticed that the figure appeared to have had strange eyes that glowed an almost reflective yellow, though assumed that the light could have been nothing more than a reflection of a bright headlight shining down the road. As she neared within 10 feet of the figure, it became obvious to Lorraine that the figure was definitely not a person. Lorraine would go on to describe the creature in vast detail, claiming to have gotten the perfect look of the monster before pulling away out of fear. The creature was described as being a large hairy beast featuring a human-like body, large brown chest, and strong humanoid arms, with dark grayish-brown fur wrapped around its entire body, while possessing an anatomically correct wolf-like face, with pointed standing ears that ended up in a long pointed snout, with massive fang-like teeth that were clearly visible from a distance. In the creature's hands, Lorraine claimed to have seen what looked like smashed prey. Although Lorraine quickly drove away, she believed that the animal must have been something natural to our world, and was most likely stalking the road to find food that had lost its life due to car speeding. To the popularity of the stories reported by Doris Dean and Lorraine, a local newspaper reporter by the name of Linda Godfrey had been alerted to the strange rumors of a werewolf creature and began a private investigation into the sightings that would later be published in the Wellworth County Week, a local newspaper. It was at around this time that the story of a wolf-like monster prowling around Bray Road would reach the height of its popularity, with local residents referring to the creature as the Beast of Bay Road, causing several more independent eyewitnesses to come forward about their encounters with a strange creature without fear of ridicule. The first eyewitness, a local resident by the name of Scott Bray, who owned a small private farm near the Bray Road. He claimed to have seen what he described as a large wolf-like creature, estimating it to have been the size of a bear prowling around the edges of his property. According to Scott Bray, he first spotted the creature sniffing around his pasture field adjacent to his dairy farm. He claimed that the creature was much larger than a typical wolf. Worried that the creature was stalking to make an attack against one of his dairy cows, Bray went towards the creature while armed. Once the creature spotted Bray, it immediately turned away and ran. The next day, Scott pre-inspected the area where the creature had been sighted and discovered large dog-like paw prints, much too large to have been a typical dog or a wolf, mixed with human-like handprints scattered throughout the area. Fearing that the animal might return when he was not around and possibly attack one of his cows, Scott armed himself once again and used the footprints in an attempt to track down and hunt the creature. After following the tracks for several hundred feet, he noticed that the prints suddenly seemed to have disappeared, as if the creature had completely vanished. Although he would spend several hours looking throughout the area in an attempt to pick up a new track, no evidence of the strange, overly large wolf-like prints, and the human-like handprints were seen elsewhere in the area. Several days after Scott's sighting, however, another local resident claimed to have encountered an upright wolf that matched Bray's description. According to a man by the name of Russell Guest, he had been walking near Bray Road, in an area completely overgrown with weeds and low-lying brush, when he heard rustling in the dense overgrowth. Wondering what could have been making the noise, Guest began investigating the area and shouting out loud, fearing that perhaps a large animal was lurking nearby, slowly waiting to attack him while he was unaware of his surroundings. After several more shouts, Guest claimed to have seen a large dog-like creature suddenly stand up out of the nearby bushes or slowly walking towards him on its hind legs. According to Russell Guest, the creature stood at roughly around 5 feet and possessed wide shoulders and was completely covered in dark fur. For several seconds, Guest stood frozen, staring at the dog-like creature in complete terror, as it looked unlike any dog he'd ever seen before. Before long, the dog-like creature began running at Guest while on its hind legs, causing Guest to turn around and start running and shouting. After getting a distance away, Russell Guest turned around and noticed that the creature had dropped on all fours and was no longer chasing him, instead seemingly traveling towards the direction of Bray Road. Believing that the sightings were something far more supernatural, the reporter Linda Godfrey began to investigate other possibilities and other strange creatures in the region, and would later publish a book on her findings with the title of the book being The Beast of Bray Road. Today, more than 50 independent sightings of the creatures have been reported surrounding the small town of Elkhorn, and many hundreds more sightings of dogman-like creatures have been reported all across North America. So what do you make of these encounters? It's fair to say that a soldier's bravery is unmatched. These individuals do the job so that the majority don't have to. They have courage, strength, and a lack of fear, going into situations that many of us will never see. It's for this reason that we should show them respect and understand that at the end of the day they're still human. Strange things happen to everyday people, as some of the most interesting stories come from those who have served in the military. The thread was recently put together detailing some of the strange things that military personnel have witnessed. This person detailed their story. This story isn't about me personally, but was told to me by my uncle. He didn't often open up about his military career for obvious reasons, but on this one occasion he decided to open up and tell me about one of his experiences. Perhaps this was the sole reason why he didn't want to talk about it. My uncle served in Vietnam and said that while out there he and his team would encounter what he can only describe as short people, describing them as being hobbit-like and covered in hair. He said that on a number of occasions these creatures that also had small feet would almost torment him and his team. This happened a number of times while they were on patrol. He said that although these sightings didn't last long, he was able to get a good look at them, describing them as looking primitive and being much shorter than the average human, but saying that they were much more hairy than the average human. I could see that this was tough for him to talk about, and by the way he was telling the story it was as if he knew how outlandish it sounded, but he was firm about what he saw while on duty, and said that he wasn't the only one to encounter these things. It's an interesting family story that I'll hold on forever. End quote. Although hobbit-like creatures running around and tormenting soldiers doesn't sound like it's rooted in fact, there's actually records of these creatures being encountered by soldiers who are stationed in a region. These creatures have been given the name of rock ames, or rather Pechitut when translated into Vietnamese, and have been recorded plenty of times. Dubbed Monkey Mountain, one particular spot appears to have attracted the eagle-eyed curious individuals who witnessed these creatures. Specifically, those who frequented Monkey Mountain began to expect to see or encounter these strange animals. Though despite those in the region being well-equipped, they also detailed that the rock apes also seemed to be one step ahead. The name rock apes was coined due to the reputation quickly built that when soldiers would throw rocks to these creatures, they would throw them back. Regarding their appearance physically, these creatures are described as a staggering 6 feet tall, with a strong build and being understandably intimidating threat to humans, further characterized through their large bellies, unproportionately large limbs, and hair ranging from brown to reddish in color. The rock apes hold a distinctive appearance to someone who knows what or who they're looking for. Those who have been fortunate, we might argue unfortunate enough to encounter these creatures, have reported seeing more than one, leading many to believe that the rock apes had a preference to live in large rooms and stay localized entirely to the jungle, living in relative peace away from human civilization, at least up until the breakout of the events that played out during that time. A rather alarming and concerning trait here is that these creatures do not appear to fear humans, with them being seen so many times throughout the area that soldiers would say that they would almost taunt them. Following the descriptions that began to flood in, the vast majority of reports were dismissed, with the plausible explanation being presented that perhaps the horror soldiers had witnessed had a devastating impact upon their cognitive abilities, with their minds simply giving an exaggerated, hyperbolic description of an orangutan, or more accurately, a group of them. One issue with this, though, is that the region's orangutan population has been extinct for centuries upon centuries. Limiting this as an explanation, the existence of this creature is still being debated. Another soldier detailed their story. While being stationed abroad, I got talking with someone who'd been staying in the room a few doors down, and they told me that I have nothing to worry about here, except from the woman in black that roams the corridors during the night. I didn't think anything of it, and thought that he was just messing around. It's important to note that there were 2 buildings that were separated from each other, with both of them having a corridor. You could see through the windows of each of the buildings and so see the corridors that were parallel to each other. So one night I ended up walking down the corridor and I can see in the corner of my eye someone who's walking down the other corridor. As I turned my head, I immediately froze. The other person walking down the opposite corridor was a woman dressed in blank, long hair, and looked pale. When I looked at her, my heart sank, and I had a terrible feeling come over me. I ran back to my room with the hairs still raised on my neck. I got into bed and didn't tell anyone until morning. It was one of the worst experiences of my life." End quote. What's strange is that it appears that not only are there several cases of strange sightings of a ghostly female figure with long black hair wearing a long white or black gown, but these entities seem to appear all across the world in many different countries. This has led many to believe that this phenomenon can appear to almost anyone, and will usually take form when a woman undergoes a tragic event while remaining pure of heart. So what do you make of these interesting stories? Space is one of the last unexplored frontiers. Astronomers are constantly making new discoveries, helping us to better understand the cosmos. For years now, there's been speculation that there's a huge planet in our solar system, with astronomers and scientists saying that this celestial body is affecting everything within our solar system. One of the issues they've faced is trying to pinpoint where this object is. Astronomers said they brushed over data that could have revealed this mysterious planet. It's estimated that this object was seen over 20 billion miles away. Michael Rowan Robinson from Imperial College London was the one who brought this discovery to light, saying that he searched through old archives in the hopes of finding this object. He said that once he tracked down this old piece of data, it did in fact reveal an odd-looking blimp, which he says could be evidence of this mysterious planet. After finding it, he then went to analyze data which had been collected by the infrared astronomical satellites. This was captured in 1983, and it actually revealed 3 sources which could have been Planet 9. Ron Robinson did say that it could have been a mysterious celestial entity that astronomers missed during the 80s, but did note that we don't have much to go by. Scientists have recreated this planet and revealed that if it does exist, it's estimated to be over 10 times larger than Earth. Caltech researchers Mike Brown and Konstantin Batygin said the following about their findings. Using samples of the orbital elements and estimates of the radius and albedo of such a planet, we calculate the probability distribution function of the on-sky position of Planet 9 and of its brightness. For many reasonable assumptions, Planet 9 is closer and brighter than initially expected, though the probability distribution includes a long tail to larger distances, and uncertainties in the radius and albedo of Planet 9 could yield fainter objects. After updating calculations of observational biases, we find that the clustering remains significant at the 99.6 confidence level. One of the problems that researchers are facing is how far away this object is, if it even exists in the first place. It's too far away from our sun to be illuminated, meaning that researchers have to guess where it is. Although they've noted that this object is having an effect on things outside of Neptune, experts from the University of Michigan have suggested that this object may actually be a small black hole. Although others have noted that this is nothing more than a theory, and that we don't have enough evidence to label it as a black hole. During the 1980s, the infrared astronomical satellite was able to map over 96% of the sky. It did this over a 10-month period. Researchers said, though, that at the time they weren't looking for an object 10 times bigger than Earth, so no further tests were conducted in order to find out what this thing was. Ron Robinson then used modern computer techniques in order to reanalyze the data, saying that this wasn't as straightforward as it sounds, as the infrared astronomical satellite had detected over 250,000 points in space. The team were able to pinpoint this large celestial object down to 3 points. NASA said the following on their website. Caltech researchers have found mathematical evidence suggesting there may be a planet X deep in the solar system. This hypothetical, Neptune-sized planet orbits our sun in a highly elongated orbit far beyond Pluto. The object, which the researchers have nicknamed Planet 9, could have a mass of around 10 times that of Earth, and orbit around 20 times farther than the Sun on average than Neptune. It may take between 10,000 and 20,000 Earth years to make one full orbit around the Sun. The announcement does not mean that there is a new planet in our solar system. The existence of this distant world is only theoretical at this point, and no direct observation of the object's nicknamed Planet 9 is being made. The mathematical prediction of a planet could explain the unique orbits of some small objects in the Kuiper Belt, a distant region of icy debris that extends far beyond the orbit of Neptune. Astronomers are now searching for the predicted planet. End quote. Jim Green, director of NASA's Planetary Science Division, said the following: "The possibility of a new planet is certainly an exciting one for me as a planetary scientist, and for all of us. This is not, however, the detection or discovery of a new planet. It's too early to say with certainty there's a so-called planet X. What we're seeing is early prediction based on modeling from limited observations. Is the start of a process that could lead to an exciting result." End quote. The predicted orbit is around 20 times further from our Sun on average than Neptune, which orbits the Sun at an average distance of 2.8 billion miles. It would take this new planet between 10,000 and 20,000 years to make just one full orbit around the Sun, when Neptune completes an orbit roughly every 165 years. They estimate the gravity of this potential planet might explain the unusual orbits of those Kuiper objects. Astronomers are now looking forward to the future and will start to use powerful telescopes in the hopes of tracking down the object. The Caltech astronomers said the following: "We would love to find it, but we'd also be perfectly happy if someone else found it. That is why we're publishing this paper. We hope that other people are going to get inspired and start searching." Anytime we have an interesting idea like this, we always apply Carl Sagan's rules for critical thinking, which include independent confirmation of the facts, looking for alternative explanations, and encouraging scientific debate. If Planet 9 is out there, we'll find it together, or we'll determine an alternative explanation for the data that we've received so far. Now let's go explore. So what do you make this announcement? And do you think this planet exists?